We are here at Seminole Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida, my home casino and one of my favorite poker rooms to play at. First hand we get into here, we're playing 5, 10, 25. I raised to $75 in the cutoff with Queen 10 of hearts. The big blind, who is a short stack, makes to call, and the straddler makes to call as well. Three ways to a nice flop of ace, king 7, 2 hearts. We flop a royal flush draw, our first hand. Checks over to me, I bet 100. Big blind calls, and the under the gun straddler makes to fold. Turn is a 5, doesn't improve us at all, and with around $400 left in his stack, I think the best option here is just to put him all in, put the pressure on him. We have a royal flush draw, so many outs here, so I ship it in for his last $450. He doesn't snap call, but eventually he does put in the chips, and he shows Jack 6 of hearts for a Jack high flush draw, and he's basically drawing dead against our Queen 10 of hearts. The river card's a 9, and we win a pretty sizable pot with Queen high. Making a royal flush would have been nice for the vlog, but it's pretty nice to take down over a $1,000 pot with Queen high, our very first hand here at the Hard Rock. I miss my blinds while getting some food and come back to 8-9 offsuit. Since I posted $25 when it folds to me, I decide to raise with 8-9 offsuit to 75, and the big blind makes to call, heads up to a Queen 9-9 board, flopping trips. He checks, I put out a bet, and he calls. Turn card 3 of diamonds, I size up now to $250, and it gets the job done. He makes to fold. One of the first tough spots we get into is when I'm on the $25 straddle and the small blind raises to $75. The big blind calls, and for only $50 more, I defend with a suited king. We flop top pair on king jack 4 2 diamonds. Small blind, the initial raiser, puts out a bet of $90. When the big blind folds, we have a pretty standard call with top pair. The turn card is the 6 of diamonds, now bringing in that front door flush, and my opponent checks to me. With top pair and a weak kicker, we could go for a small sizing here, or we could check back, and I like to check this one back for pot control. River card is the 6 of clubs, now pairing the board, and my opponent checks for a second time. So now I have to decide whether I want to check back my top pair, or if I want to go for value. I do think I can go for value now, getting called by a jack, maybe pocket queens or pocket tens. Because I just called the flop and then checked back the turn, I'm not going to have a king or a flush very often. I put out a bet of $175, just hoping I can get a hero call here by those smaller pocket pairs, or maybe a hand like ace jack or queen jack. However, a call is not what we get. We get put into a nasty spot when my opponent check raises me to $675. Well, I was not expecting that at all. Facing a $675 check raise here on the river. Now, check raises in live poker are almost always the nuts. Now, sometimes up against Euro pros or guys who play online or potential guys who play in tournaments, maybe they could have some bluffs in their range. But my opponent in this situation is an older white man with his wife sitting behind him. I don't think he's getting way out of line here on the river with a check raise. I feel like he mostly has us beat, but what kind of hands could he be bluffing with? Well, if he is bluffing here on the river, I would expect him to be doing it with a hand with the ace of diamonds so that he blocks the nut flush. Maybe a hand like ace queen with the ace of diamonds, ace 10 with the ace of diamonds, but really that's the only hands that I can think of. All other hands either have a pair or are beating us. So given this player type, given the fact that he doesn't look like he's bluffing, he'd been playing pretty tight and passive the entire game, I decided to fold my top pair, and he just shows me one card, and that is the ace of diamonds. So, unfortunately, I will not know if it was a bluff or not, but I feel pretty good about this fold. I don't think our king was very good. With two players away from the table, along with the button player, I have queen 9 of diamonds in early position. I raised to $60 with the $25 straddle on. The small blind, who is a very tight Euro nit, makes to call. And we go heads up to a 10-3-5 board. When he checks over to me, I decide to go with a big bet on this board, thinking he's going to have a lot of smaller pocket pairs, like pocket 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s, and they can't really withstand too much pressure on this particular board. He decides to make the call, and we turn top pair with the queen. He checks, and against a very loose player, I would put in another bet here, but versus a very tight knit, I just think he always has pocket pairs when he calls out of the small blind, and it's not out of the question he could have a hand like pocket 10s, pocket 5s, or pocket 3s. Also, if he does have a smaller pocket pair to the 10, like 7s, 8s, or 9s, he's not going to call another bet if I bet here. It's pretty hard to get called by 3 streets by a worse hand on this particular run out, so I decided to check my top pair back on the turn, and the river is another queen, so we now make trips. I'm really enjoying this run out, going runner, trips, but surprisingly enough, my opponent leads into me for $210, and this really took me off guard. I expected him to check almost 100% of the time. If he's leading here, I'm pretty sure he has a very strong hand. Against every other player here at the table, I would put in a raise on the river for value, but against this guy, I actually think a raise may just be a little bit too thin. Like I said, he's a super nit, hardly playing any hands. He can easily have a hand like pocket 10s, pocket 5s, and pocket 3s. If I do put in a river raise for value, would he even call me with a hand like ace 10 or pocket 9s or king 10? I actually don't think so. So against this guy, who's very tight, I elect to go with a safe route here and just call, and he shows pocket jacks. So unfortunate for us, that's the one hand that I think if I did raise the river, he would have to call with, but we win. We take this one down. Running pretty good so far, and next up, I have Queen Jack offsuit in the under the gun $25 straddle. The cutoff raises to 75, button calls, small blind calls, and I call for $50 more. Flop is Jack high, giving us top pair. The action checks all the way around to the button, who checks behind. Turn card is a Jack, giving us trips now for the 3rd time this session. Small blind decides to lead out for $100, and he only has about $450 left. This is just a spot where we always want to be putting in a raise, so I make it 4 black chips, $400 to go. The cutoff folds, the button folds, and the small blind decides to ship his whole stack in there. I make the call for around $50 more, and we go to the river, which is a 6. I show my queen jack for trips, and my opponent shows pocket 6s for a rivered full house, a 2-outer, and we're not going to be taking this one down. Honestly, a pretty sick beat. We had trip jacks. My opponent only had 2 outs in the deck. He put all of his money in there with pocket 6s on a Jack 10 board, and he got there on the river. So we lose this one in pretty nasty cooler fashion. When playing a poker session, I normally play 20 to 30% of hands, which means 80 to 70% of the time, I'm just folding and folding and folding. Now, of course, you guys don't see that. All you see is the most exciting hands out of a 5 or 6 or 7 hour session. But in this one, I go super card dead after that queen jack hand. I lost around $500 in that hand, and then I don't ever get a playable hand again for another 90 minutes. So for over an hour and a half, I just fold and fold and fold. So now 1 hour and 42 minutes after losing that pot, queen jack versus pocket 6s, I'm under the gun and finally pick up a hand, king queen offsuit. I make it $60 and only the button makes the call. We get a glorious flop of 5, 6, 7 rainbow. I check and he bets and we fold yet again. We're about 4 hours into the session, dead even, not up or down money, until this next hand comes up where there's an early position raise to $60. I have ace 10 of spades next to act, and the under the gun player is a very tight Euro nit. I think a 3-bet is fine and a call is fine as well. The small blind player, the guy who got me with pocket 6s, has around a $3,000 stack now, so I'd rather just call and play pots in position against that guy, and that's what happens because he makes the call and the big blind makes the call as well. 4 ways to a 10 high board. The action checks to the under the gun player, who checks. With the action on me, top pair top kicker, I put out a bet. I make it $130. Small blind comes along with a call, our nemesis, the guy that got us with a 2-outer just an hour and a half ago. And now the under the gun player makes the call as well. I'm pretty sure my top pair top kicker is way ahead of the small blind who's playing any 2 cards, but I am slightly confused what the under the gun player can have. He raised pre-flop and then check called $130 on this flop, so I think he has something, but I'm not sure if he has us beat or if we're ahead here. The turn card's the 3 of diamonds, which is really one of the safest cards in the deck. Shouldn't improve any of my opponents to any better holdings if we had them beat on the flop. Small blind checks and the under the gun player checks again. And I think this is a card we're just going to continue to bet on. I can get called by so many hands here, so I make it $325. Small blind folds rather quickly, but The under the gun player now comes along with a call again. A big pot brewing now heads up in position to the final card, which is the 4 of diamonds. Now 3 diamonds on the board, and the under the gun player continues to check and flow over to me. And now I have to decide, should I bet here? How much should I bet? Or should I just check behind? This situation is very player dependent. If I was up against a small blind heads up who's playing any 2 cards, I would obviously be betting here, but up against a tight Euro nit who called twice out of position, I just got a bad feeling, so I decided to check behind and show my ace 10, and he shows pocket kings for an overpair. So 10 is no good for us, and the chips are not being pushed in our direction. Kind of a mini cooler there, top pair, top kicker versus an overpair. A fairly standard hand there, really not much we can do. We're now stuck over $1,000 in our session, and I'm in the cutoff with ace 10 offsuit. I raised to $75. The button calls 75, the small blind calls 75, and the straddler calls as well. 4 ways to 10, 10 deuce, 2 hearts, making trips with an ace kicker. I would say this is probably one of the best boards you can get, holding ace 10 with the ace of hearts. I bet $75 and the button folds. Small blind comes along with a call and the straddler folds, so now we're heads up to the 8 of diamonds. We're now heads up and the small blind checks it over to me. I would say around 70% of the time. We're going to have the best hand here 95% of the time, so I'm definitely going to be putting out a bet, a little Ron Burgundy joke for you guys if you got it or not. Anyway, a little background information on the small blind player. He's another Euro player, but he's definitely different than the other 2 guys I played hands with previously. He's not a Euro Pro nit. He's definitely very loose aggressive. I have a ton of history with him, and he's well known for pulling some massive bluffs. He's not scared money. He gets in there, he plays some hands. He's very loose and aggressive. So I actually decide to go with a small bet here on the turn. When you're up against some super loose aggressive players, sometimes you just got to give them a little bit of rope, and that's what I do in this situation. I bet 1/3 size of the pot, $150. I want to make it look like I'm not too sure about my hand. I'm not too confident. By betting this sizing on the turn, I'm saying I have a hand that I want to bet for protection, but I am slightly concerned that he could have a 10, so it's a little bit of a reverse betting tell here or something like that. Anyway, the action's back over on him, and he does take the bait. He check raises me to $500. We get exactly what we want, check raising us to $500. Now, there is a small percentage of the time that we are beat here. We're losing to a hand like 10-8 suited, pocket 8s, and pocket deuces, but the likelihood of that happening are very, very small. I think the best option here is to call the turn and evaluate here on the river. Allow him to blast off if he is bluffing, so that's what I do. I throw in a $500 chip, a massive pot here, going to the final card, which is the Queen of Hearts. Not my favorite card because now we're losing to Queen 10 for a full house, and the front door flush gets there. The action's on the small blind, the guy who check raised us, the loose aggressive player, and he continues for a huge bet of $1,000. Now I'm thinking to myself, well, shit, maybe I don't have the best hand, but against this guy, our hand is way too strong to fold, and I think raising would just be a little bit too thin on this board run out versus this sizing on the river. So I just call, and we get shown the bad news. Pocket 8s for a turned full house, and our trip 10s are no good. Not gonna lie, this one hurt pretty bad. Not only did we lose an all-in earlier with trip jacks versus a rivered set, this time we were way ahead on the flop, and he hits a 2-outer on the turn, and we lose over $1,500 in this pot. We're now stuck about $2,500 on the session. Poker's a tough game when you keep getting 2-outered or 1-outered to lose some massive pots. But anyway, let's move on. King, Queen of Spades, I call a $125 raise from the button. And the straddler, who is definitely the spot at the table, a VIP player playing probably 80% of hands, makes the call as well. 3 ways to a Queen Deuce 3 board, 2 spades, a magical flop for us with top pair, king kicker, and the king high flush draw. Button bets $125. I make the call, and the VIP player to my left makes the call as well. Turn 6 of clubs, I check, and now the under the gun VIP action player leads out for $325, and the button makes a pretty quick fold, and now I'm just starting to think, damn, did I just get two outered again? Did he hit two pair on this turn, or maybe even a straight? If I just had a queen with no redraw to a flush, I think I would actually fold versus this $325 bet, but given the fact that we do have a king-high flush draw to go along with our top pair, folding is out of the question versus this guy, so I throw in the chips and we see a good river card. Finally, it's a king giving us top two pair. Now, of course, we could be losing to a set of deuces, a set of threes, a set of sixes, or 4-5 for a straight, and the way this session is going, it really wouldn't surprise me if I made top two pair, and he did have a speed on the turn, but I don't want to check my two pair and have him check back a queen or a worse two pair, so I decided to lead out on this river card. I make it $575. With $2,000 left in his stack, if he does ship it all in, I just think that we're always beat here, but that doesn't happen. He eventually decides to call. I show my hand and it's good, and he shows queen six for a worse two pair, which is pretty sick because we had him completely crushed on the flop, and somehow he found the six on the turn, but we found the king on the river, and finally, after about 6 hours of playing, we take down a decent pot. After winning this pot, my stack has grown now to over $4,500, but we're still stuck over $1,000 on the day. It could be worse though. We were stuck $3,000 just about 30 minutes before, but over the next hour and a half of play, we lose every single hand that we get dealt in, and our stack quickly dwindles down to around $3,500, now still stuck about $2,000, leading in to the last hand of the night. I have ace jack, and the VIP action player who was sitting to my left now moves to seat number 1 and is sitting to my right. He limps for 25, I raise to 100, small blind calls, and the action player calls as well. Three ways to king, jack, 8, 2 spades. With second pair, I check this one back. Turn card 3, small blind checks, and now the action player leads out for a big bet of $300. Now, over the last hour and a half, this guy has just been blasting off. He's been betting a ton, raising a ton, and we really haven't seen much of his hands. Once I check back the flop, he could be doing this with an 8, a jack, a straight draw, a flush draw, and I don't think I can fold just yet. I put in 3 black chips for a call, and the small blind folds. The river card is a deuce, a complete brick. Every single draw misses. The action's over on the VIP player in seat number 1, and he throws out a $500 bet. Almost every decision that I make at the poker table is always player dependent. If I was facing a super tight knit who has no bluffs in his range, a $500 bet with second pair would hit the muck very quickly, but against this guy who did have $3,000 when he came over and now only has $1,000, he's been blasting off, bluffing, playing a ton of hands. He could just have a lot of hands that we're beating here. All straight draws, all flush draws. Even if he's betting a jack, we're beating that because we have ace jack. It's possible he could have a king, maybe two pair, but I just don't see how we're beat here very often. Given this player type, I think we just have to put in the call. I'm not really happy about it, but I flick in the chip and pocket threes is what he has for a turn set. This is the third hand of this session where someone turned or rivered a 2-outer on us to beat us in a pot. I'm pretty frustrated. Things are just not going my way. Losing money, and after 8 hours, I end up calling it a night. And the only good thing about this day is that the valet was nice enough to already have my car ready for me when I stepped outside. All right, guys, that is it for this one. I was trying to do this outro outside of Hard Rock, but it's so hot and it's so humid here in South Florida that I was just drenched in sweat. I was covered in sweat trying to talk to the camera. So I came home, got into the air conditioning, and you guys now get to see little buddy Rogue. He's just hanging out here. As for today's session, not my favorite day at the poker tables, that is for sure. We lost a lot. We got unlucky a lot. Things just really didn't go my way. I lost $2,800. Feel okay with the way I played, though. Don't feel like I played bad. Feel like a lot of those spots were just standard losing spots. And unfortunately in poker, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose a lot sometimes. And that was today. Lost $2,800. The only hand that I feel bad about is the last hand, calling down with ace jack. I don't like the way I played that hand at all. I think I should have been betting the flop. And if I did check back the flop, I think I could call the turn, fold the river. So I think that was probably $800 that I didn't need to lose in that hand. But what can you do? You got to learn from your mistakes. I got to make sure I'm not letting the tilt or the frustration get to me. And I do feel like it kind of got to me in that hand. But on a positive note, I was looking back through my channel and looking at some old videos, and I realized that today's video is 137 poker vlogs. And then I went to my page and I saw that I have 7.7 million views total on this poker page. 7.7 million views on this poker page. It's just insane. That's ridiculous. Over a year and a half, 137 videos and 7.7 million views. I want to thank you guys again. I try to thank you guys for showing up every single week, for watching my videos, for liking, for subscribing, for commenting, and for all of you guys that I meet in person. It's awesome. I really appreciate it. This poker channel has completely changed my life, and I'm super excited to see how the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, how it's going to go. But I'm going to keep making poker videos for you guys. I'm going to keep the same way. Poker hands, right to the point, analyzing, all that stuff. And hope you guys stick with me throughout the whole time. But that is it for this one. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I got to take a shower. I got to hang out with this little guy. So that is it for this one. Until next time, I'll see ya.